Caligula was born on August 31st, 12 AD in Antium to parents Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder. He was named Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. Caligula's family was deeply ingrained in Roman politics. His father was Mark Antony's grandson. In just 2 years, his great-uncle Tiberius would become emperor of Rome. Tiberius had adopted Germanicus and made him his heir. Caligula's father would have become emperor after the end of Tiberius's reign. Caligula would have 5 siblings. His older brothers, Nero Julius Caesar, Drusus Caesar, and 3 younger sisters, Agrippina the Younger, Julia Drusilla, and Julia Livilia. Agrippina the Younger would become the mother to future Emperor Nero, who would himself become as well known as Caligula for his cruelty. His father, Germanicus, was a popular general and took his family along to Germania when Caligula was very young. His mother dressed him up in a Roman soldier's outfit, and the soldiers coined the name Caligula, meaning little boots. It is said that Caligula hated the name, but the name stuck nonetheless. His father was very successful and very popular with his soldiers and the civilians. Emperor Tiberius began to notice how successful and liked Germanicus had become. Emperor Tiberius sent Germanicus to the eastern provinces. While he was there, he became sick, or he was poisoned, and he died in 19 AD. He was just 33 years old. Many believe that Gnaeus Calpurnius Piso poisoned Germanicus under order of the emperor. Some say that Germanicus himself even claimed he was poisoned by Piso, which was ordered by Tiberius. Piso would later end his life, most likely by the order of Emperor Tiberius, but the people were outraged about Germanicus's death. There was an inquiry to satisfy the people who loved and cherished him. It was decided Piso was the only person responsible, but with the emperor in full control over everything in ancient Rome, it's no surprise a royal conspiracy was not discovered. Agrippina blamed Tiberius for Germanicus's death, and she wasn't quiet about it either. She tried to keep her family safe from Tiberius. She also wanted her sons to have a chance to become emperor. Tiberius was very paranoid and was constantly worried about conspiracies, murder plots, and political rivals. Tiberius would become reclusive and start a campaign to end any political opposition. Agrippina was arrested in 29 AD. She was accused of plotting against the emperor. She was banished to an island. Agrippina would die in 33 AD. She most likely starved to death. Caligula's older brothers, Nero and Drusus, were accused of treason. Nero was exiled to the island of Panza, where he died in 31 AD after years of torment. Drusus was kept in a dungeon in Rome, and he died in 33 AD. Caligula's brothers were seen as rivals to Tiberius. They were older and already in politics. Even though they were family, they were imprisoned and eventually starved to death. Germanicus was still a very popular name in Rome, and many saw the children of Germanicus as successors to the throne. Caligula was a teenager when Tiberius arrested his mother and brothers. He was not seen as much of a rival at the moment. That may have saved his life. But Caligula and his 3 sisters were not out of the woods yet. Tiberius made sure that they were watched constantly. In 31 AD, when most of Caligula's family was exiled and starving to death, Caligula was summoned to the island of Capri. Tiberius had moved to Capri in 26 AD to escape the pressures of Rome, and now the young Caligula was summoned to Capri by the same man who banished or killed half of his family. But Tiberius took a liking to Caligula, much to everyone's surprise. Caligula took to being loyal and obedient to Tiberius and learning what he could from him. Caligula befriended Macro, head of the Praetorian Guard. It was said that Macro would make sure Tiberius did not get suspicious of Caligula, and he would tell him how obedient and loyal Caligula was. Tiberius was getting old now. He was in his 70s, and his grandson, Tiberius Gemellus, was much younger than Caligula. While on Capri, Caligula was in constant fear for his life. It could all end in a moment's notice, but Caligula would spend 6 years on Capri. He would learn just what it meant to be emperor. He witnessed cruelty and excess of all kinds. Pornographic material littered the walls, and Tiberius would have men and women walking around barely dressed. Sexual encounters were happening all around the palace. Lavish parties were thrown with all delicacies from the empire. Tiberius would have people satisfy his urges while swimming in the swimming pool, and if anyone angered the emperor, he would throw them off the cliffs of Capri to their death. He would have treason trials against his political enemies, and bring them to Capri to have them killed. Caligula would use what he learned on Capri for his own rule. At 78 years old, Tiberius would die on March 16, 37 AD. His death was possibly suspicious, and some believe that Caligula had a hand in Tiberius's death, maybe even the cause of his death, with help from Macro, to ensure that Caligula would become emperor. The Praetorian Guard backed Caligula as emperor, most likely due to Caligula's friendship with Macro. Caligula's uncle Claudius could have also been declared emperor, but Caligula won, possibly due to his father's popularity and his time spent on Capri directly with Tiberius. The Roman Senate formally declared Caligula as emperor. He reached Rome in late March and began his reign as emperor. Tiberius had named Caligula and Gemellus as heirs in his will, but Gemellus was still too young to hold office. The 24-year-old Caligula was now emperor of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. He was in total control. At first, Caligula needed to make a good impression on the Roman people as well as the Roman Senate. In Tiberius's will, 500 sesterces was to be paid to each Praetorian Guard, but Caligula doubled it on the advice of Macro. He gave every soldier in the army a bonus, and every Roman civilian was given 150 sesterces, and heads of household were given 300. It was said that Caligula went to the top of the roof of the Basilica Julia and began throwing buckets of coins down onto the Roman people. People were pushed down, and floods of people ran towards the coins. But this caused chaos, and many people were trampled, while Caligula just stood there and watched. A 1st century account of making it rain, or in this case, making it hail. Tiberius had been stingy with the wealth of Rome, and Caligula would make sure he had the support of the people, the military, and the Praetorian Guard. Even though he got a kick out of seeing the chaos and the injuries, the people loved him for it. A 1st century stimulus check. Caligula cut taxes, and he offered more games like horse races nearly all day long. It was said that he attended nearly every horse race. He organized lavish public games, gladiatorial contests, and theater performances to entertain the masses and show how generous he was for the people of Rome. He showed his loyalty to religion by reversing religious bans. He reversed Tiberius's policies and tried to make amends with the Senate. He tried to include senators in the decision-making process and met with them more often. He went around the empire to where his family had been killed and recovered their ashes and brought them home to be buried in Rome. He adopted Gemellus and made him his heir. He took on building projects and started construction of 2 aqueducts in Rome. He expanded the Circus of Gaius and Nero chariot track and ordered a large boat to be built and sent to Egypt to bring back a giant obelisk for the center of the track. He restored temples and improved ports. His first 6 months in office went well, but after 6 months into his reign, he suffered from some sort of severe illness that nearly killed him. It took him weeks to recover. While Caligula was sick, Macro turned his back on Caligula and convinced Gemellus to speak to the Roman people to reassure them. After Caligula recovered from the illness, his behavior changed dramatically. Ancient historians say this period marked a turning point in the reign. He became more erratic, paranoid, and tyrannical. After he learned what Macro had done, he actually promoted him, since he could not openly kill one of his head Praetorian guards. He sent him to Egypt, but before he could leave, Caligula made sure that he ended his own life. Gemellus was also arrested, and the Praetorian guards were sent to give him a sword to end his own life. But the boy did not know how to use it, so the guards showed him, and then he ended his own life. Caligula threw massive parties and banquets. It was claimed that he brought delicacies from all over the empire. He had a poison made to expand his stomach so he could continue eating. He had pearls dissolved and added to wine. He had a strong bond with his sister Drusilla. Some say that he had an unusual bond with her, claiming that they were involved in an incestuous relationship. But scholars claim that there is no real evidence of this. Drusilla became very ill early on in Caligula's reign, and she died in 38 AD. Her death had a massive impact on Caligula. He was devastated. After the death, Caligula made her a deity, giving her the title Diva Drusilla. She was worshipped as a goddess, with temples and shrines made for her. He declared a period of public mourning. Her image even appeared on coins. Caligula had short marriages, but his final wife, Milonia Cassiona, was said to be older than Caligula and not very pretty. But most importantly, she was already pregnant when they were married, and no one knows for sure whether the child was his or not. But she gave birth to Julia Drusilla, Caligula's newborn daughter. After his illness, Caligula began to turn on the Senate, and he tried to consolidate power for his own. He seemed to humiliate members of the Senate every chance he could get. He would force senators to run beside his chariot, or while he was being carried by his slaves, if they wanted to speak with him. On one occasion, a group of senators was speaking with him, and Caligula erupted in laughter. When they asked what was so funny, he claimed that he was just thinking that with a nod of his head, he could have all their throats slit. Caligula's sisters, Agrippina and Livilla, as well as his brother-in-law Marcus Aemilius Leopoldus, were involved in an assassination plot against him. Marcus was seeking to take the throne since a woman could not become emperor, but Caligula heard about the plot and he had Marcus killed, and Agrippina was forced to carry her dead husband's ashes as punishment. Both sisters were exiled to the Pontine Islands. Again, Agrippina would make a comeback in politics, with her future son Nero, who was nearly as tyrannical as Caligula. One of the more well-known stories that claims Caligula must have been crazy was when Caligula had his prized horse, Incitatus, brought to the table during a meeting with the Senate. Caligula supposedly said that he was going to appoint his horse as consul. Some historians claim that this proves he was insane, but others believe that Caligula was just trying to prove his distaste to the senators by explaining he had more faith in his horse as consul than them. It was just a way to insult the Senate. Caligula began a series of political purges. He went into the Senate and reopened the treason cases that Tiberius had started. Caligula asked senators to turn on anyone who spoke badly of him. Caligula would have political figures executed and acquire their wealth for his own use. He would also extort money from prominent figures. He was known to take any woman of his choosing during banquets and parties and tell the husband afterward how well she performed in bed, just to see his reaction. Caligula discovered a plot against him. He had a prominent general from his forces in Germania, Gnaeus Galliculus, executed. But Caligula needed the support from the military. The soldiers under Gnaeus were not happy about his execution, so Caligula went to Germania. He launched a military campaign of his own to try and regain support from the legions. It was said that no major battles were fought, and the battles that did happen were just small skirmishes. After Caligula was pleased, he took the army and marched north. He intended to invade Britain. Ancient historians claim once they reached the sea, Caligula ordered the army to march against it. Once that failed, he ordered the soldiers to start picking up seashells and placing them inside their helmets as spoils of the ocean. Some claim that this proves Caligula's insanity, but other scholars claim that there is more to the story. Some claim that this proves Caligula's insanity, but other scholars claim that there is more to the story. Rome eventually reached Britain a few years later, but the army mutinied when they reached the English Channel, refusing to board the ships for weeks. Some historians believe this might have happened when Caligula tried to invade Britain, but he could not just outright kill the soldiers for disobeying him. The whole reason for the trip was to gain support back from the army. They claim that Caligula ordered them to pick up seashells as a punishment to demoralize them for not invading Britain. Some of Caligula's construction projects were focused on himself. On one occasion, Caligula ordered the construction of a floating bridge that spanned the Bay of Baiae. He used the bridge to enter a resort town, mainly as a spectacle. The area was a popular vacation area for senators and wealthy aristocrats. Some believe he did this partly to make the nobles fear him even more. He partied all night and went across the bridge the next day in a chariot. In the 1400s, fishermen discovered two massive ships in Lake Nemi, but they were too deep to salvage. It wasn't until the 1920s when Mussolini ordered the lake drained so archaeologists could recover them. The largest ship was 240 feet long and 79 feet across. The other ship was 230 feet long and 66 feet across. The lake would have been nearly covered by these two massive ships. Some historians believe the ships were large floating pleasure palaces, with pipes that pumped cold and hot water across the ship. Parts of the ship were even heated, with hot water snaking underneath the floors. The ships were larger than historians believe the Romans were capable of building. The ships were put on display in a museum that was built over them, but in World War II, the wooden ships were destroyed in a fire. Near the end of Caligula's reign, he wanted to be worshipped as a god. He had statues built to be placed in temples. One story claims that Caligula would sit between the feet of Jupiter, so when people went to worship Jupiter, they were also worshiping him. His actions led to widespread hate amongst the Senate and other members of Roman elite. Some believe Caligula was trying to move his court to Alexandria in Egypt. This may have angered the Praetorian Guard. An assassination attempt was orchestrated by a group of conspirators, including members of the Praetorian Guard and Senate. The plot was led by Cassius Chaerea, a tribune of the Praetorian Guard, who had personal grievances against Caligula. It's believed that Caligula was constantly poking fun at Chaerea for having a feminine voice and possibly even having an affair with his wife. The day of the assassination, Caligula was attending a public event. He went home to take a bath. It is believed that Chaerea approached Caligula and stabbed him. The other conspirators leapt out of the shadows and all began stabbing Caligula over and over again until his death. Members of the plot went to the palace and assassinated Caligula's wife and their young daughter to try and extinguish his bloodline. The Senate wanted to regain control of Rome, but the Praetorian Guard had other plans. They raced over to Claudius, Caligula's uncle, and they declared Claudius the new emperor. The people of Rome were furious. The people loved Caligula. He had been the emperor who had cut taxes, given Rome's wealth out to the people, constantly held races, games, and gladiatorial events. He had banned privileged seating at these events, which forced the elite to fight for a good seat like the rest of the population. He was the people's emperor, and now he was dead, cut down by assassins. Claudius was now the new emperor, and he refused the Senate's request to formally declare Caligula a public enemy. The reign of Caligula lasted just under 4 years, from March 18, 37 AD to January 24, 41 AD. History would remember Caligula as the mad emperor. Others would rival his violence, and more would be killed. But Caligula is believed to be one of the most vile, tyrannical, and violent emperors, and many claim he went insane. What do you think about Caligula? Were the stories written about him accurate, or were they used to tarnish his name? Put it down in the comments. I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and we will see you on the next. Peace.